last wire, it can be put down a bit, whoever's this is.
That's pro, smart.
Thank you. 3 minutes, 3 minutes. Today we're going to have Chief Mark Saunders. Rank is Chief, first name Mark, M-A-R-K, last name is Saunders, S-A-U-N-D-E-R-S. In addition, we will have Homicide Inspector Hank Itzinga here as well. Rank is Inspector. He is from Homicide. First name is H-A-N-K. Last name is I-D-S-I-N-G-A. As well, it is a full house today. Just be mindful of the video camera up there that will be broadcasting live. And I will be right back. One minute. Thirty seconds. Seconds. Good afternoon and welcome to Toronto Police Headquarters. I'm Constable Jennifer Sidhu. Today I would like to introduce Chief Mark Saunders. He will address the findings into the investigation, into the Danforth shooting investigation. Chief.
Thank you, Jennifer. And before I begin, I just want to say A big thank you to all of the men and women, sworn and civilian, that were involved in this investigation. It was very complex when you look at the size and magnitude and the gravity of what had taken place. But we would not have been able to reach where we are right now with the tremendous work and efforts under the leadership of Detective Sergeant Terry Brown, Hannah Bartz, and the rest of the crew from Homicide, as well as everyone else that was involved in the case. So earlier today, my investigators met with the families of the victims of the Danforth shooting, which occurred on July 22nd, 2018. There has been dialogue with most of the families over the past 11 months, and although today does not give them the closure for the losses they suffered, it will provide some, but not all, of the answers. I know I speak on behalf of the Toronto Police Service and the entire City of Toronto when I say our hearts and thoughts continue to be with all of the victims and the victims' families. Our investigative findings may help to provide some closure for the families and the victims by answering some of the questions. It does not provide all of the answers as to why this occurred. We took the unprecedented step of committing to releasing our investigation findings for two reasons. Number one, out of the compassion for the families involved, and number two, to acknowledge the impact of this tragic and violent attack on our citizens and on our community. Our disclosure contains a level of details that we don't typically release. In fact, I do believe that this is the first time that our service has prepared and released investigative findings in this scope of what we are providing you today. Ultimately, we sought to answer many questions in our investigation. The one question that the family and the public wanted to know is why. Although we've collected all of the evidence that was available to us for this crime, a crime where the shooter died at the scene, we may never know the answer to why. Investigators attempted to gather information about every aspect of the shooter's life. I'll summarize our main findings. In this process, we interviewed acquaintances, employees, and family members. We obtained records from hospitals and schools, and we seized evidence from his home. We followed his digital footprints, reviewed his phone records, and analyzed his electronic devices. Our investigation concludes that the shooter had an extensive history of mental health issues, first documented in 1996. His background details chronicle a troubled individual who is clinically treated for violent acts against himself and an outward expression of violent thoughts. The shooter did not have a criminal record. He first came into contact with the Toronto Police Service in 2010 when officers transported him to a hospital for mental health evaluation following an incident involving self-harm at school. The investigation found that the shooter was not affiliated with any radical ideologies, hate groups, or terrorist organizations. He also never applied for, nor was granted a firearms license. His mental health issues were first reported by the Toronto District School Board in October of 1998. A psychiatric evaluation completed at the request of the Toronto School Board placed him in the upper end of the intellectually deficiency range. Over his academic years, Faisal Hussain's behavior caused teachers and staff to raise concerns about his mental health and the safety of students and staff. Referrals were made to the Toronto District School Board Social Work Department 6 times between 2001 and 2010. A risk assessment completed in the time frame concluded that he had a high to medium risk for violence. Outside of the educational settings, Faisal Hussain was treated on several occasions for mental health issues. In June 2010, he was diagnosed as having antisocial personality disorder. On July 12, 2010, Faisal Hussain was referred to a health team that was better equipped to address his reported mental health struggles. He began seeing a mental health professional in August 3, 2010. However, his treatment adherence over the next 4 years was inconsistent. His last documented appointment with a mental health professional was in May of 2014. In November of the same year, he refused further medical attention. A medical health professional had suggested that his family doctor refer him for a forensic psychiatrist. There are no records to indicate that this occurred. Involving his police interactions, Faisal Hussain did not have a criminal record. On 3 occasions between May 14, 2010 and February 15, 2014, police transported Faisal Hussain to a hospital under the authority of the Mental Health Act. 4 years later, on July 20th, 2018, just 2 days before the Danforth occurrence, Faisal Hussain was arrested after he attempted to steal ice cream. He was released with no charges. I'll speak specifically to the events that occurred on July 22nd of last year. On July 22nd last year, Faisal Hussain left his work at about 3:05 p.m. Video surveillance from his home address showed him leaving his apartment building at 9:10 in the evening. He was recorded on surveillance footage entering the north side of Alexander the Great Parkette in the area of Danforth Avenue and Logan Avenue at approximately 9:56 p.m. All witnesses indicated he appeared to be alone. Faisal Hussain shot and struck 7 people in the area of the Parkette. Of the people struck, 6 were in the area of the Parkette, and 1 was at Mezzi's, a restaurant located at 456 Danforth Avenue near the Parkette. It was at this Parkette where Reese Fallon, 18 years of age, lost her life. The first 911 calls were received at the Toronto Police Services Communications Center at approximately 10 p.m. Multiple callers subsequently reported that a male near Danforth Avenue and Logan Avenue shooting at people in the area. There were several people injured. As more information was received, it was determined that Faisal Hussain traveled westbound along Danforth Avenue, firing his weapon as he walked. Faisal Hussain continued to walk westbound on the north side of Danforth Avenue to the area of Dolce Gelato, located at 414 Danforth Avenue. He continued westbound on the north sidewalk, discharging rounds as he walked. He traveled into the street and continued to fire. Faisal then walked back to the north sidewalk to the area of Papa's Grill. Witnesses reported that Faisal Hussain stood on the sidewalk directly in front of Papa's Grill, located at 440 Danforth Avenue, and discharged numerous rounds into the restaurant. 1 victim was struck at this location. Numerous spent cases were recovered along the north sidewalk of Danforth Avenue between Papa's Grill and Dimitri's Cafe. Faisal Hussain fired multiple shots through the front window of Dimitri's Cafe. It was at this location that Julianna Kozis, 10 years of age, lost her life. 2 other people were also struck with bullets. He continued walking westbound on the north sidewalk of Danforth Avenue, discharging rounds. Video surveillance showed Faisal Hussain passing 364 Danforth Avenue on the north side of the street in a westbound direction at approximately 10:01 p.m. He crossed directly from 364 Danforth Avenue to the Second Cup Coffee Company located at 355 Danforth Avenue. Faisal Hussain fired as he crossed the street and continued firing rounds into the Second Cup Coffee Company and westbound at 3 victims on the sidewalk. He shot 2 individuals near the Second Cup Coffee Company and continued walking. Damaging rounds were recovered in front of Pots and Pans Eatery located at 337 Danforth Avenue. When Faisal Hussain reached Bowden Street, he turned southbound. Video surveillance showed Faisal Hussain running southbound on Bowden Street from Danforth Avenue, approaching a laneway on his right. Faisal Hussain walked westbound through the alley at approximately 10:05 p.m. and returning eastbound 32 seconds later, as there were no exits at the west end of the alley. As he walked past the camera, he appeared to have a firearm in his hand. It was at this time that officers began arriving in the Danforth area. 1 witness followed Faisal Hussain from Danforth Avenue onto Bowden Street in the alley. Faisal Hussain fired multiple rounds at that witness, but did not strike him. Faisal walked northbound on Bowden Street. He discharged rounds into the area in the direction of No. 7 restaurant, striking 1 person. At 10:06 p.m., a police car was traveling northbound on Bowden Street towards Danforth. At this time, Constable Zhu and Constable Vezdonkin observed Faisal Hussain firing his handgun. Fearing for their safety, they both fired back. A short time later, Faisal Hussain was found deceased on a sidewalk in front of the Danforth Church located at 60 Bowden Street. A firearm was found near his body. A cellular phone was also seized from his person. On July 24, 2018, a post-mortem examination of Faisal Hussein's body was conducted. The cause of death was determined to be perforated gunshot wound to the head and brain. Faisal Hussein's injuries were consistent with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A toxicology analysis of Faisal Hussein's body revealed no significant findings. On July 23, 2018, investigators executed a search warrant of Faisal Hussein's family residence. Investigators seized multiple cellular phones, laptops, electronic and data storage devices. Investigators also seized an empty gun box, AK-47 magazines loaded with bullets, and hundreds of rounds of loose and boxed ammunition in a variety of calibers. In addition, Glock, Ruger, and Winchester magazines, a soft rifle case, and a trigger guard were also seized. There are multiple packages containing drug-like substances and a set of DVDs labeled with titles related to conspiracy theories surrounding the September 11, 2001 attacks. The drug-like substance seized from Faisal Hussein's bedroom were analyzed by Health Canada. The beige powder was found to be heroin. The brown rock-like substance was determined to be MDA and phenacetin, and the lighter white powder was determined to be phenacetin. The quantity and packaging of the drugs suggested the drugs were not for personal use. The firearm seized from where Faisal Hussein's body was located was determined to be a Smith & Wesson M&P 40. The Center of Forensic Sciences tested this firearm. The test fire results were compared to the cartridge casings located at the scene. All test cartridge cases were identified within the limits of practical certainty and having been fired from the seized firearm. This firearm was manufactured by Smith & Wesson in Springfield, Massachusetts, and lawfully exported to Toronto in 2013. This firearm was also one of many firearms that was stolen from a lawful gun shop in Saskatchewan in the year 2016. It is unknown how it came to be in the possession of Faisal Hussain. Investigators attempted to gather information about every aspect of Faisal Hussein's life. Investigators have not received information from other police services that he had acted in a way that had warranted previous investigation. From the information received, there is no evidence that Faisal Hussain was directed or assisted in the crimes he committed on July 22, 2018. Having said that, I'm subject to answering questions that I can. I also have Detective Sergeant Terry Brown here and Inspector Hank Zinga in case there are questions that I don't have the answers to.
Chief, do you think that there was a breakdown in Hussein's mental health treatment that may have played a part in what happened?
Well, you know, I won't speculate, but when you look at the length of time in which it was identified that there were mental health issues, you do see some gaps and breakdowns. You see people trying to make the efforts, but I can't speak to what or where the failure points were, but it is very clear that mental health played a very critical role, unfortunately.
Do you think that would be followed up by somebody with regard to a breakdown?
Well, I know that the governments of the day have a very strong understanding of the mental health issues that the country has, specifically Canada. Every year, our numbers increase for calls for service with respect to people living with mental health. We're in the process of working at a multi-ministry level to come up with the solutions. You can't just do it within one ministry. I think that narrative is becoming stronger now. Lots of funding is moving towards it now, and how the products of what that funding determines at the end of the day, I think will be very critical, and I hope that it does work in favor of the serious issues that we have in the City of Toronto, and I can speak as Canada has when it deals with mental health issues.
Chief, without a motive, is there any way that Toronto Police could have predicted this rampage?
No.
Chief, obviously there are some questions here that can't maybe be answered definitively, but are there any lessons here for police or social services or anyone?
Well, I think, and I don't want to speak out of my wheelhouse, from a law enforcement perspective, the way in which we responded and dealt with the situation. It worked out well. We had to work with the SIU as well because, as you know, because of the initial investigation at that time, the cause of death and police interaction became a focal point, so it had to go to the SIU. They worked very cooperatively with us because they understood the gravity of what was going on, and I had an opportunity to give a little bit more information than I normally could under the laws pertaining to the SIU. I would say that there needs to be more of a collective approach in how we define community safety. I've spoken quite a bit on mental health, and you know, if law enforcement is involved at the front end of the decision making with people that live with mental health, then there is a significant failure. And what speaks to this is when you read the chronology, you see that it was identified quite a while ago, and we now have loss of life. We have so many people that we had to address today and through this investigation that are still hurt by this. To be on a sidewalk on a night like any other night, and all of a sudden, for no reason, for no connection to the person, we've got loss of life, we've got people that are injured, we've got people that this will have impact on for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. And so, obviously, to some degree, no one can predict something like this, but do you think that there were any intervention opportunities over the years that were missed?
Well, it does speak to that. I won't go into the depth because I wasn't there at those tables to have those discussions, so I don't want to even take that chance. Our approach from way back to now, we work and we're involved with our situation tables, our focus tables, which does look at those things. And 75% of the cases that we put to the focus tables are brought by the Toronto Police Service. So the multi-agency approach is something that's critical. It's something that we have moved towards as well. But we're only one entity of that multi-agency approach. And so the investment and hopefully the opportunities will increase for more agencies to be an active part from a preventative and not a reactive piece when it comes to that.
If you look at the timeline here, it seemed like the school board did a lot to try to help Mr. Hussain and try to coach him and help with the problems he was going through. But once he got out of school, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I mean, once he got out of school, it seemed as though that supervision just really wasn't there. And I wanted to know from you, like, what do you think, as the police chief, is the best way to kind of bridge that gap? And would you even have the resources to monitor or look after or look out for people?
Yeah, and again, that's out of my lane. I don't want to get there, and I don't want to start pointing fingers at agencies or entities. We've put this out there because we felt that it was important, that there are a lot of questions that were asked about this particular incident, a lot of different theories, some that were incorrect as to what the events were, and we felt that a lot of the public had huge concerns. It brought a lot of grave concerns as to, you know, is there something else? And so with the extent of the investigation, the quality of the investigation, we were openly putting out there to say this is what it is, and people will formulate their own opinion, but they'll have a much stronger objective accountability as to what took place.
What kind of changes are you going to push for then after learning what we've learned about this case?
Well, you know, my job is to continue the discussion. So I've pushed for anything that promotes community safety, and this is another opportunity for those healthy discussions. The governments are listening, the governments are funding, and sitting down and figuring out what cracks need to be filled. I'll wait for those conversations as they come.
Chief, I know you have to be careful about assigning any kind of motive here, but upon seeing a connection to Elliot Roger, I do have to ask, did you explore whether there's any connections to Inside?
Well, I stated earlier that there are no connections to any ideological or no organization or no entity whatsoever. Everything that was done through a very thorough, comprehensive investigation, going through all of the digital footprints, all of the interviews, the various agencies, there is no touch point that says that was the case.
So do you classify this as a mass shooting phenomenon then, if there was no apparent motive?
I don't like the word phenomena for this. I think this is a very tragic and horrible situation that occurred in the city of Toronto. I don't want to estimate or diminish the victims, those that have lost their lives, and the victims that are still here. From a law enforcement perspective, I'm proud of how the organization arrived, dealt with the situation. In just a couple of minutes, it had stopped. So that speaks to a fantastic job done by us. The investigators did a thorough, comprehensive investigation. There's tremendous compassion that was presented in this, which is why I made sure that we didn't just come out here and blast this. We spoke to the families individually, and we had that opportunity of letting them know what we're doing and why we're doing it before coming out here. And so I don't want to give this incident a title. It's unfortunate that it happened, and anything that any agency can do to help to prevent it from happening, I think is a better discussion to have.
Chief, can you just talk about what happens when someone is arrested under the Mental Health Act? How long they're, I guess, apprehended for, or are they taken to the hospital? Just what's the process?
Well, the initial process, when law enforcement is involved, it's if a person is a harm to themselves or to others, or cannot properly take care of themselves, that form gives us the authority to apprehend and bring to a health institution. It's a 72-hour assessment, and then the specialists figure out what needs to be done. It can be compelled for 72, but depending on what the circumstances are, dictates the length of time in which a person is apprehended. So it's not just a matter of apprehending, it's a long-term, right? It's a long-term process, and what do you do, and what's the ongoing care, which I can't speak to.
Chief, can I ask a question? Pakistan trip is the one that I think we want to know more about, so maybe your detectives can talk about that as well. And you say that there's no connection to terror groups, but I'd be interested to know the connections to his brother and his brother's surety, which we've all heard about, that had weapons and fentanyl and these kind of things. Was there any relationship there that you've been able to find out? Pakistan and out of the two, he went to.
With regards to travel that he may have taken, some countries don't have any digital ability to pull things up to say when people have traveled or not traveled to. So we did reach out to countries to try and figure out when and how often he traveled. Unfortunately, because it's all hand bombed, they weren't able to provide all that information. Regarding his brother has his own difficulties right now on an unrelated event, as we know, and has had medical difficulties since that arrest. So with connection to the surety, I think as the chief properly said, this is what we have with regards to the evidence that we've learned. We're certainly aware of associations with different people, but there's been nothing that we have gleaned or learned that suggests any connection with Mr. Hussain and anyone else in relation to this event proper.
Now, the weapons that were found in the apartment, and obviously the weapon that was used in the tragic event, do you have it, I don't know if you've covered that or not, but did he purchase this, or how did he get this, and were those his arsenal that was in the apartment?
So that's two-pronged. With regards to the firearm that was involved, as we've already heard, it was from a gun shop that was lawfully placed in that gun shop in Saskatchewan. That firearm, along with a number of other ones, were seized. We don't have a nexus on how that got here as well into Toronto. There's nothing in that investigation where there are persons of interest or suspects that we can look at and associate it to Mr. Hussain here in Toronto. Now, that being said, it's been my experience. It's not uncommon when we come across community guns that get passed on and around through the community. And I can't tell you the complete background of this, but there's no correlation or there's no direct connection with that firearm and how he got it.
What about the other stuff in the apartment that you mentioned?
So with regards to the ammunition, there was a large assortment of ammunition that was in fact discovered and located in his bedroom. It was packaged in such a way that we're unable to, again, trace where that may have come from. When ammunition is purchased lawfully or legally, for lack of better words, there's normally packaging in place that suggests to us or tells us where it was purchased from. This was a lot of bulk ammunition that had been repackaged or placed in different types of bags, so I couldn't tell you its origin. It's not like things such as cereal where there's a timestamp on when they're manufactured or where they're from. There's nothing on cartridges that will tell us where the location was, where it was manufactured, when it was manufactured, and where it was transported to, unfortunately.
Just have one more in there.
Yeah.
The chief mentioned it, and I've interviewed the gentleman, Jasper Singh, who is the owner of the Sherry Punjab restaurant. That conversation, you did allude to it, but you didn't talk about it. Did that come up at all? Did you interview him to get some sense of why, of all the people, including young girls that were shot, that this guy was spared? Did you get any sense of that?
We have spoken with numerous individuals that were present, and we have their account of what they observed. I can't tell you why he was spared. I really don't have that answer, and the only person that can tell us, unfortunately, is dead and hasn't provided that information for us. So.
Did that happen anywhere else, or was it just that one guy, or was there other people throughout the route that had that same experience?
There was him specifically. There was another individual that was in a motor vehicle. I don't know whether there was any interaction or not, but he was able to see the shooter, and he was not shot.
Detective Sergeant, are you satisfied with the investigation?
Define satisfied.
There's so many questions. I mean, I've spoken to countless people as well, and obviously everybody wanted to know why. We all wanted to know why. Do you feel satisfied with the outcome of this investigation?
So I think satisfied is a difficult word to use, just because there are so many questions that we'll never have answers for. At the end of the day, the only person, as I said, that knows why he did what he did is no longer with us. And for our purposes as investigators, that's the start point for me. The young man dies, and then we work backwards. And when we work backwards, we work through the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months. As silly as that sounds, this is why you're seeing this report, or how you will be seeing this report. That's why we know so much about his background. But I can tell you this about Mr. Hussain. The day in question, through all the people that we've spoken to, the people that he works with his family, was no different from any other day. That is to say, he went to work, he was late as he's been to work, he went home, he was with his family, conversations took place. There was nothing that anyone has relayed to us that suggests to us that he was in crisis on that day. So when he left his home that day for the last time, that fateful time, there's nothing that we've learned to suggest that anyone could have foreseen that this was going to happen in the next hour.
Is this still open, this investigation?
No investigation closes, okay? But I can tell you what we've learned so far is that we have not attributed anyone else as being involved in aiding, assisting in any way, shape, or form at Mr. Hussain. That being said, if new information comes to light, if people come forward and say, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, then we revisit everything. But
To Pakistan, maybe, to find out what, and get the dates and when, since you don't know what's behind it, might be interesting to.
so again, because it's evidence-based, just because people travel abroad doesn't mean that,
I know that.
no, but let me finish. Just because people travel abroad doesn't mean that there's anything nefarious about that.
You don't have any other answers?
No, we don't. And I think that's the unfortunate part for everyone involved. And this is why I think the chief has properly said, we have shared everything that we found out about this person. There are things in here that if 100 different people read this report, they will come to their own interpretations and conclusions of what this means. It won't change.
Bottom line is that the investigation, if there's some new evidence because of this news conference today.
Yes.
You will be there. If it means getting on a plane, you'll go on a plane over to
Correct.
Pakistan.
If there is a reason to travel somewhere, if there is a reason to speak to someone, then that will be done. I can assure you of that.
What do you make of what you found on his computer about Altanasi?
I'm sorry?
It says you found some images of Altanasi on not ringing any bells.
I'm going to apologize right now because this was such a large investigation. This was segmented into different individuals, so I have tech section people that examined and obtained information for us. I'm certainly, it's not ringing a bell right now, and I apologize, but certainly I'm aware of everything that's in this report. Again, I will finish it this way. If there was something that we were in possession of that suggested that criminal charges should be laid in relation to this, it would have been done already. If something comes to light after today and further on to suggest that that needs to happen, that will happen. At this hour, at this moment, at this day, there is nothing in our possession to suggest that anyone else aided, assisted, or abetted Mr. Hussain on the events that happened on that day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes today's news conference. Thank you. The report is available online on the Toronto Police website.